History tells us that the Blitzkrieg was a product of genius military strategy, but it ignores the chemical nightmare powering the engine. The Third Reich didn't just conquer nations, it force-fed its military a synthetic, industrial-strength fuel that erased the line between man and machine. While the world watched in terror as cities fell in daze, they couldn't see the silent, pill-popping reality behind the armor. This wasn't just a military tactic. It was a mass-scale pharmacological experiment that pushed soldiers to commit unthinkable atrocities. Behind the propaganda of a pure, disciplined army lay a nation drowning in its own secret poison. The controversial birth of superhuman stimulants. Imagine a soldier standing on the edge of a forest in 1940. He has not slept in 3 days. By all biological logic, he should be shivering in a corner, his mind fractured by exhaustion, his eyes unable to focus on the horizon. Instead, he is standing perfectly still, his pulse racing, his pupils dilated to the size of saucers, and his brain firing with the cold, predatory intensity of a machine. He is no longer just a man, he is a biological weapon, fueled by a synthetic engine that has permanently altered his perception of reality. This is not the result of superhuman evolution or mystical prowess. It is the outcome of a laboratory breakthrough in Berlin that transformed the Third Reich into the world's first methamphetamine-fueled military power. The story begins in October 1937, long before the first panzers rolled across the Polish border. Inside the sterile, white-tiled laboratories of the pharmaceutical firm Temmler-Werke in Berlin, a chemist named Fritz Hochschild patented a compound that would soon reshape the very nature of human endurance. This was methamphetamine hydrochloride. Marketed under the brand name Pervitin in 1938, the drug was presented to the German public not as a dangerous narcotic, but as the ultimate solution to the stresses of modern life. It was a perfect piece of marketing genius, a Trojan horse delivered in a tube of 30 tablets. The public, weary from the economic instability of the previous decade, embraced it as a harmless stimulant. It was recommended by doctors to treat everything from minor depression to a simple lack of drive. It was treated as no more dangerous than a strong cup of coffee, a magical remedy that could lift the fog of fatigue from an overworked nation. The normalization of the drug was both swift and absolute. The state-sponsored addiction machine did not just target the worker or the soldier, it invaded the home. The confectionery manufacturer Hildebrand recognized the potential of this new pharmaceutical craze and launched a line of Pervitin-infused chocolate pralines. Known as housewife chocolate, these sweets were laced with 15 milligrams of pure methamphetamine, 5 times the dosage of a standard military tablet. Advertisements featured smiling, vibrant German women claiming they could clean their homes, cook for their families, and maintain their social duties without ever feeling the weight of exhaustion. By turning the most addictive substance on Earth into a mid-afternoon snack, the regime successfully desensitized the entire population to the reality of the chemicals they were consuming. Behind this veneer of domestic productivity, however, the military leadership was looking for something far more sinister. Dr. Otto Friedrich Ranke, the director of the Institute for General and Defense Physiology at Berlin's Academy of Military Medicine, became the primary architect of a new military doctrine. He understood that in the age of high-speed mechanized warfare, the ultimate limitation on victory was not fuel, ammunition, or even armor. It was the human need for sleep. In September 1939, Ranke conducted a series of cold, calculated trials on 90 university students. He forced them to perform grueling tasks while under the influence of Pervitin. The results were chilling. He proved that the drug could chemically force the human brain to bypass the biological requirement for sleep for up to 50 hours at a time. It granted the subjects an unnatural, euphoric boost in concentration and self-confidence, while effectively killing their sense of fear and self-preservation. To Ranke, this was the key to total war. By eliminating the necessity of rest, the military could sustain an operational tempo that was physically impossible for any other army on Earth to match. The transition from civilian laboratory to industrial military asset was completed with terrifying efficiency. As the High Command prepared for the invasion of France, they did not just order a supply, they triggered a total industrial mobilization. The Temmler-Werke factory in Berlin was pushed to its breaking point, producing up to 833,000 tablets per day to meet the ravenous demands of the armed forces. For the spring offensive of 1940, the military ordered over 35 million 3-milligram tablets of Pervitin and its variant, Isofan. These tablets were shipped to the front lines under the code name OBM, distributed in massive quantities to tank crews, infantrymen, and Luftwaffe pilots. The stage was set for a new kind of conflict. Millions of men were prepared to charge into battle with their nervous systems overclocked and their empathy suppressed by a synthetic chemical shield. The divide between the quiet, mundane existence of a German household eating drug-laced chocolate and the mechanized, drug-induced violence of the coming Blitzkrieg was about to vanish entirely. The Third Reich had successfully managed to bridge the gap between human physiology and industrial output, creating an army that was designed, both in mind and body, to function as a lethal extension of the state. Battlefield impact and tactical advantage. Think about the physical limits of the human body. In the spring of 1940, the French and British armies felt secure behind the dense Ardennes forest. It was considered naturally impassable for a massive armored force, let alone one that could move fast enough to break entrenched lines. But General Heinz Guderian demanded the impossible from his panzer crews. He ordered them to drive forward for at least 3 consecutive nights without a single hour of sleep. Under normal biological conditions, a human being operating heavy machinery after 72 hours awake would suffer from micro-sleeps, severe cognitive decline, and visual hallucinations. Yet, Guderian's men executed the order flawlessly. This was not due to superior training or sheer willpower. General staff officers, like Graf von Kielmansegg of the 1st Panzer Division, were actively distributing tens of thousands of pills directly to the drivers and gunners on the front lines. Shipped under the military code name OBM, these were pure methamphetamine tablets. The German motorized divisions effectively deleted the human need for rest. They drove continuously for days, executing the tactical doctrine of rapid, mechanized warfare at a speed that completely shattered the Allied defensive strategy. The Belgian and French defenders were paralyzed by an enemy that simply never stopped to sleep. The impact of Pervitin went far beyond just keeping eyes open. It fundamentally rewired the psychological baseline of the frontline soldier in the middle of a high-stakes combat environment. Methamphetamine forcefully floods the brain with dopamine and norepinephrine. In a civilian setting, this creates intense euphoria and self-confidence. On a battlefield, it completely overrides the natural human instinct for self-preservation. Fear and anxiety are critical evolutionary survival tools that keep soldiers cautious. By chemically suppressing these emotions, the German High Command forged troops who felt entirely omnipotent. They attacked heavily fortified positions with a level of aggression and impulsivity that defied standard military logic. Commanders highly prized this pharmacologically induced courage, as it turned hesitant conscripts into reckless shock troops willing to execute highly dangerous maneuvers without a second thought. Beyond the psychological manipulation, there was a deeply calculated logistical masterstroke behind the massive distribution of methamphetamine. Rapid offensive thrusts required armored spearheads to bypass enemy strongpoints and push deep into hostile territory. inevitably outrunning their own supply chains. Food convoys simply could not keep up with the tanks. As a potent central nervous system stimulant, Pervitin acts as a massive appetite suppressant. The German soldier fighting under the influence simply did not feel hunger or thirst. This allowed them to subsist on drastically reduced daily food rations without any immediate drop in physical energy reserves. For the logistics officers managing this chaotic advance, it was a massive operational relief. They could stop loading trucks with bread and meat and instead pack them to the brim with artillery shells, tank tracks, and diesel fuel. The bodies of the soldiers were running on chemical fumes, allowing the war machine to prioritize heavy military hardware over basic human sustenance. The desperate pursuit of even greater pharmacological endurance eventually led to some of the darkest atrocities of the entire war. The state utilized its extensive concentration camp system to test the extreme limits of the human body. At the Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Oranienburg, SS authorities established a specialized punishment battalion known as the Shoe-Running Detail. Under a succession of brutal camp commandants, prisoners were forced to test the durability of military footwear and synthetic shoe soles by marching around a multi-surface track. But this was also a live laboratory for experimental performance-enhancing drugs. Nazi medical researchers loaded these starving prisoners with heavy 20-kilogram packs and injected them with toxic, massive doses of pure cocaine, Pervitin, and experimental chemical cocktails. They were forced to march continuously, covering up to 55 miles a day without a single moment of rest. The chemical stimulants temporarily masked the sheer agony of the exertion, but the physical destruction was absolute. The vast majority of these test subjects suffered catastrophic physiological collapse, dying from massive cardiac failure and extreme exhaustion within the first 24 hours. As the strategic situation collapsed in the latter half of the war, the High Command sought even more extreme chemical solutions for highly hazardous, suicidal missions. Vice Admiral Helmuth High demanded a wonder drug to keep specialized soldiers operational during prolonged, isolated operations. In 1944, pharmacologist Gerhard Orzechowski answered this call by synthesizing the D-Nike cocktail. This was a devastating mixture containing 5 milligrams of cocaine, 3 milligrams of Pervitin, and 5 milligrams of Eucadol, a highly potent morphine-based opioid painkiller. The primary target for this cocktail was the crews of the experimental Navy mini-submarines. These sailors were locked inside freezing, claustrophobic, and poorly ventilated metal tubes deep underwater for days on end. The physical and psychological toll. The image of the German soldier as a tireless, invincible machine was a carefully manufactured lie, but the reality behind that myth was a slow, agonizing process of biological disintegration. When the chemical influence of Pervitin finally faded, the human body did not just return to its natural state. It collapsed. Once the dopamine and norepinephrine spikes bottomed out, the soldiers were left in a hollowed-out, catatonic state. They became little more than living ghosts, vacant and incapable of the most basic defensive maneuvers. These men, once characterized by aggressive, rapid-fire movement, were reduced to zombie-like figures, sitting in silence for up to 48 hours as their nervous systems struggled to recalibrate. In the chaos of the front line, this was a death sentence. An entire unit might be rendered combat ineffective for days, leaving them vulnerable to the slightest enemy pressure, effectively trading temporary speed for long-term tactical suicide. The physiological damage occurred beneath the skin, invisible but devastating. Methamphetamine works by forcing the heart to beat at an unnaturally elevated rate while simultaneously causing severe vasoconstriction. The blood vessels tighten, restricting flow, while the pressure within the cardiovascular system skyrockets. For a soldier in the middle of a forced march or an intense firefight, this was the equivalent of redlining an engine until the block cracked. The heart was forced to function at 200% capacity for hours on end, leading to an alarming rate of sudden cardiac failure. Young men, officially in the prime of their lives, were dying of heart attacks in the middle of a march, their bodies simply unable to cope with the artificial stress placed upon them by their own medication. This was not a side effect. It was the inevitable end state of a military that treated its soldiers as biological fuel. The psychological cost was even more corrosive to the fabric of the army. As the stimulants flooded their brains, soldiers frequently entered a state of drug-induced psychosis. Acute paranoia, violent mood swings, and vivid auditory hallucinations became commonplace. The battlefield, already a place of extreme stress, was transformed into a landscape of distorted reality. There are numerous documented instances where these delusions led to horrific, senseless violence. Soldiers suffering from the paranoid effects of the drug would open fire on their own comrades, convinced they were being surrounded by enemies that did not exist. This chemical instability also ripped away the remaining vestiges of behavioral restraint. Acts of unchecked violence against civilians and brutal atrocities that might have been checked by moral hesitation in a sober state were instead emboldened by a chaotic, drug-induced lack of empathy. The same chemicals that removed fear also eroded the fundamental connection to human decency. The tragedy of this state-sponsored addiction is best viewed through the eyes of those who lived it. Heinrich Böll, a man who would eventually receive the Nobel Prize for Literature, was just one of millions of soldiers caught in this cycle of chemical dependency. During his time on the front, he wrote desperate, heartbreaking letters home, pleading with his family to send him packages of Pervitin to keep him awake and functioning in the face of the encroaching horror. He was not alone in his need. He was a symptom of a larger systemic malaise. His letters capture the profound, bone-deep exhaustion of a man who was no longer allowed to be human, forced to rely on government-supplied speed just to survive another day of total war. His struggle did not end with the peace treaty of 1945. Like millions of other veterans, he carried the physical and mental scars of that systemic addiction for the rest of his life, a living testament to the generational trauma inflicted by a regime that valued its soldiers only as long as they could be mechanically enhanced. Ultimately, the myth of the superhuman was a hollow construction. The reality was a force of broken men, their cardiovascular systems failing, and their minds splintered by years of forced synthetic acceleration. The decision to integrate methamphetamine into the military infrastructure was a tactical gamble that prioritized short-term operational gains at the cost of the humanity of its soldiers. In the end, the regime succeeded in creating an army of addicts, leaving behind a legacy of health crises and deep-seated hidden trauma that persisted for decades after the guns finally fell silent. The price of their rapid conquest was paid not just in territory or ammunition, but in the permanent, irreversible destruction of the very people the state claimed to be building into a master race. The paradox of Nazi drug policy. The Third Reich was built upon a foundation of aggressive, puritanical obsession with physical purity. The state projected an image of absolute cleanliness, a society stripped of the decadence and moral decay they associated with the Weimar Republic. Under the banner of Volksgesundheit, or people's health, the regime launched the most comprehensive anti-tobacco and anti-alcohol campaigns in the world. Physicians like Martin Stammler and Karl Astle campaigned against smoking as a genetic poison, a threat to the reproductive health of the Aryan race. In universities and public spaces, the duty to remain free of chemical pollutants was treated as a sacred mandate. Yet, beneath this veneer of national sobriety, the state was simultaneously transforming into the most efficient, industrial-scale producer of methamphetamine the world had ever seen. The regime demanded that the average citizen remain clean, while it simultaneously fed its military a constant, massive stream of synthetic stimulants to sustain the machinery of total war. This hypocrisy was not merely a contradiction, it was a weapon. While the state-controlled pharmaceutical industry manufactured millions of tablets of Pervitin for the Wehrmacht, the regime's propaganda machine was busy villainizing drug use as a sign of racial contamination. They cast narcotics as a foreign, degenerate influence, falsely accusing the Jewish population of a deliberate attempt to poison the German bloodline. The state used this rhetoric to justify the systematic persecution of anyone they deemed asocial. Political dissidents, marginalized groups, and those struggling with addiction were stripped of their rights and deported to concentration camps like Sachsenhausen. In these camps, they were forced into brutal labor or used as expendable test subjects for experimental stimulants, all while the government continued to prioritize the pharmacological productivity of its own troops above its supposed moral laws. The state essentially created a two-tiered system of chemical morality, where drug use was a crime for the individual, but a strategic necessity for the state. The rot at the center of this hypocrisy was embodied by the leader of the Reich himself. Adolf Hitler, the figurehead of a regime obsessed with health and strength, was arguably the most chemically dependent person in the country. His health was managed by his personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell, who treated the leader's chronic ailments with an incredibly dense and unorthodox medical regimen. In Morell's private diaries, Hitler was recorded as Patient A. This was not a leader guided by cold, rational strategy, but a man existing in a cycle of constant chemical influence. Morell administered a daily cocktail of sedatives, hormones, and powerful stimulants, including Vitamoltin laced with methamphetamine. As the war turned decisively against Germany, the drug regimen escalated into a full-blown addiction to death. Following the assassination attempt in July 1944, Hitler began receiving a 10% cocaine solution for 75 consecutive days, administered by his ear, nose, and throat specialist, Dr. Erwin Giesing. When combined with the daily injections of Eucadol, a highly potent morphine-derived opioid, the result was a lethal speedball. Hitler was essentially oscillating between the intense, hyperstimulated focus of the cocaine and the numb, opioid-induced euphoria of the Eucadol. This constant, high-level polypharmacy effectively detached the dictator from the catastrophic reality of the front lines. He lived within a bubble of his own making, his perceptions warped by a cocktail of some of the most addictive substances on the planet. This state of chemical delirium had direct, disastrous consequences for the final stages of the conflict. Decisions that determined the fate of millions of people and the survival of the nation were increasingly influenced by a leader who was, by all medical definitions, living in a drug-fueled haze. His growing irrationality, his delusions of impending victory, and his refusal to engage with the tactical reality of his collapsing military were all shaped by his profound chemical dependency. The man who campaigned for a clean, sober, and disciplined Germany had become the ultimate prisoner of the very substances he officially condemned. When the war finally reached its inevitable end in 1945, the facade of a pure, disciplined master race had been completely dismantled by the reality of a regime that was, from its highest command to its frontline soldiers, fundamentally and systematically drugged. Controversy and historical legacy. History is rarely a clean, settled narrative, and the discovery of the Third Reich's systemic drug habit has sparked a volatile firestorm among the world's most respected scholars. When Norman Ohler published his book Blitzkrieg, he ripped the lid off a secret that had been buried for 70 years. arguing that National Socialism was essentially a dictatorship fueled by methamphetamine. This triggered a sharp intellectual clash with traditionalists like Richard J. Evans. The argument is not about the facts, the evidence of mass production and usage is undeniable, but about the moral implications. Can we truly label an entire army as a chemically doped force without accidentally diluting their personal accountability? Critics worry that blaming a pill for the genocide and the horrors of the war is a form of dangerous historical revisionism, a way to excuse the monstrous choices made by men who were fully capable of deciding right from wrong. Yet, defenders point to a different reality. The drugs were the structural lubricant of the machine. They allowed the individual to function, to suppress their natural human hesitation, and to exist within a terror state that demanded the impossible. Ultimately, as historians like Ian Kershaw have noted, chemical stimulation might explain how individuals performed under extreme pressure, but it does not, and cannot, absolve them of their monstrous moral guilt. The shadows of these pharmaceutical experiments did not vanish with the fall of Berlin in May 1945. The end of the war did not bring an immediate detox for the German population. Instead, the drug supply chain simply moved into the black market and the post-war medical system. For decades, Pervitin remained an active, accessible component of daily life. It was routinely prescribed for depression, anxiety, and obesity throughout the chaotic Reconstruction years. Even at the highest levels of the new West German government, the chemical legacy persisted. Konrad Adenauer, the very first chancellor, used Pervitin regularly into the 1960s to maintain the grueling pace of his political schedule. This detail is staggering, because it shows how deeply embedded the culture of pharmaceutical enhancement had become in the infrastructure of the new German state. It took until the 1970s for East Germany and 1988 for West Germany to finally pull the drug from the official medical supplies, proving that the chemical ghosts of the Third Reich lingered in the halls of power long after the regime had collapsed. We must also confront the silent, profitable complicity of the corporate sector. Giants of the pharmaceutical world like Temler-Werk, Merck, and Bayer did not just sell pills. They actively collaborated with military planners. They utilized their industrial capabilities to mass-produce addiction, showing zero ethical hesitation as their products were tested on concentration camp prisoners or handed out to soldiers for a war of annihilation. This is a sobering, uncomfortable truth about the power of modern industry. Scientific innovation, when decoupled from moral oversight, is easily co-opted to serve the most destructive ambitions of a totalitarian state. These companies were never just neutral manufacturers. They were essential components of the war machine, profiting from the very suffering that their products helped to fuel. The dark legacy of this history has found its way into the most underground corners of modern society. In the neon-lit, chaotic club scenes of Berlin, the association between synthetic stimulants and the Nazi past has taken on a disturbing new life. Some in the underground drug subculture have adopted the colloquial moniker Hitler Speed for crystal meth. This linguistic link is a grim, jarring reminder of how history echoes in the present. It turns the most destructive narcotic of our era into a cultural marker, linking current addiction to a totalitarian pathology that should have been buried in the dust of the 1940s. The history of the Third Reich's drug program is not merely a footnote about military tactics or a debate over historical responsibility. It is a cautionary tale about the intersection of scientific advancement and unchecked state power. When a state decides that its goals are more important than the biological and mental limits of its citizens, there is no end to the horrors it will justify. The chemicals used to fuel the Blitzkrieg are gone, but the fundamental danger, the ability of a government to manipulate the human mind and body for industrial gain, remains a volatile, unresolved facet of our own time. We must continue to examine these uncomfortable truths, not to excuse the past, but to ensure that we understand exactly how fragile our humanity remains when confronted with the cold, calculated efficiency of state-sponsored chemical control.